Welcome to What If, the show where I, Jake from State Farm, answer your insurance what ifs. Today's caller is Gio. What's up?
Hey Jake, what if I'm shopping for a new policy, but there are so many options that I freeze up and just can't choose?
It's okay. An agent can help you choose the right coverage. At State Farm, we're there for your what ifs.
Oh, now what if I need help deciding on dinner?
Tacos.
Good idea.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
A Sam-free episode of the Show Before the Show podcast, the official podcast of minor league baseball. I know how often Sam is the thing that people are clamoring to have more of, and yet this week you got no Sam. I'm apologizing to our Sam-centric fans. No Sam this week.
That is a sad thing, Tyler. It's just you and me, and we're gonna get through it. But yet again, no Sam. He's out vacationing. I don't know. Taylor Swift has Swifties. I know we have the equivalent of that for Sam here on the podcast.
Call them Sammies. Dykstra's.
Yeah. Dykstra just doesn't really work for that kind of thing. So they're just called Sammies, Sammy Nation. And we apologize to all the Sammies out there.
Yeah, 2 straight weeks must be nice, Sam. Jeez Louise, get some work done.
Yeah, no, he's not considered. He's not really a considerate person and not really thinking about what we have to do in his absence.
Well, welcome into this week's episode of the official podcast of minor league baseball, the Show Before the Show. My name is Tyler Mon. Benjamin Hill is in New York City. We got a fun episode coming up for you this week. We are at long last going to get a chance to talk with Dan Simon of Studio Simon, who I don't believe we've ever had on the podcast before somehow, Ben.
No, that's weird because through my entire career and the time that you and Sam have been here, we talked a lot about logos, and of course there's a lot of different logo designers out there, and we can get surprised with like, oh, never heard of that company, or this team went with the local brand. But big picture, for the better part of the last 2 decades, when a minor league team rebrands, chances are it's either Brandiose or Studio Simon. So we've talked about the work of both a lot, and I actually don't think we've ever had Jason or Casey from Brandiose.
I don't think we have either.
Which is very strange, but today we got Dan Simon on, and I think it's something we'll do more often. Dan will definitely be happy to come on as a guest again, and he can offer so much insight into the industry and the branding process in minor league baseball. And we got to get on that. I think the problem is, we're always so focused on what's happening now that we're going straight to the source with like the team. And, that's what our listeners expect. Breaking news now. But sometimes we have to draw back a little bit. And,
we gotta go. We gotta go to the font of all of that creativity, and we did that this week, and I'm very excited about it. We're gonna get a chance to talk about the newest identity in minor league baseball, just unveiled today, in fact, as we are recording on November 16th, and that is the new identity of the Rome Emperors, formerly named after their parent club in Atlanta, no longer Rome, which did have a logo that kind of paid homage to the name of the town. They had an R with a baseball and a Roman column behind it. But now they have gone with a full embrace of their town's name and heritage, and a really cool new identity in the Rome Emperor. So we'll talk with Dan Simon coming up about that. Josh Jackson will be stopping by with Ghost of the Minors in just a little while. And we have entered a quiet time on the baseball calendar. Obviously, the minor league rebrand season continuing. And we talked Greensboro. We're talking Rome today. But there have also been a handful of other identities that have come out in recent days and weeks. Ben, it's sort of alternate identity season, I guess, as Logovember continues. And we're going to get a little bit of an insight into just how long it takes for some of this stuff to come together when we talk with Dan here in a little bit. But what's been popping up on your radar as far as some of these alternate identities?
Yeah, it's been a pretty big week for that kind of thing. Not a lot of full-scale rebranding this offseason, but of course, throughout the day, yesterday, today, this week in general, been a lot of alternate marks coming out. Things like the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, who probably have more alternate identities and alternate marks than any team. On Saturdays this year, they're doing a Pennsylvania Dutch-inspired hex uniform. So it's got that PA Dutch I want to say Amish style. I don't know if it's explicitly Amish, but they have Saturday uniforms in PA Dutch font with hex marks on it, and they're using it to apparently hex their opponents and keep their ballpark safe. So that's a new one from Lehigh Valley on Saturdays this year. Today, the day this podcast comes out, the Lake Elsinore Storm are offering a revised version of their iconic Storm logo. So keep an eye out for that. It should be out right around the time this podcast comes out.
Or keep two eyes out for it.
Yeah, keep two eyes out for it. Thank you, Tyler. The
I gotta
Erie,
fill the void of Sam's jokes while he's not here. I gotta be able to do them.
it's a huge void to fill. We miss you, Sam. The Erie Seawolves, they have the Howling Dead identity, which I believe they announced last year. They announced they now have a dead red Howling Dead cap that they'll wear in 2024. That is out now. What else do we got? I know there's been more than that. The Winston-Salem Dash, the Golden Age collection, taking you into quote-unquote Roaring 2024. It's a 1920s inspired alternate identity, also a Saturday identity. They're going to wear the Golden Age collection, pinstripes and a Prohibition era feel, if you will, and a gangster type feel.
Fantastic.
So that's a pretty sharp one, harkening back to 100 years ago. What else do we got? I feel like maybe that's about all I have for right now. I feel like it was more than that. A lot of stuff has been dropping recently. The Pensacola Blue Wahoos, we're recording this on Thursday in the early afternoon Eastern time. The Blue Wahoos will make a special announcement at 2:00 today. So by the time you hear this announcement will be out. And it'll be the unveiling of an international event coming to Pensacola as part of their Copa identity, which is, I always get the pronunciation wrong. Tyler, Pak to Pak?
Is that what we? I think it is. I think it is Pak to Pak, because I think we corrected ourselves to saying it was Poke to Poke, and then we read somewhere that it was Pak to Pak. But now that I'm saying that, my brain is like, no, you have it backwards.
Yeah, I've had so much problems with this that now I can't get it right. But regardless of the exact pronunciation, that's a reference or an homage to the earliest ball sport played in the Americas back thousands of years ago. So if the Pensacola Blue Wahoos have an international event coming to their ballpark in April 2024 tied into Copa, I'm really hoping that is people playing this ancient game of Pak to Pak. So go look into that right now, because that information is out for you, the podcast listener. It just has not been unveiled at the time that Tyler and I are talking. So a lot of little odds and ends going on. Saturday uniforms, alternate identities, international events. Of course, as Tyler has mentioned, Rome Emperor is out with their new identity last night, and a couple more in the works in the coming weeks for that as well. And, we'll stay on it.
All right, Ben. Newsletter continuing in the dearth of the off season. Is it dearth? Is that how you say that word? We've got a thing coming up with Dan Simon where we talk about those difficult words that you never exactly remember how to pronounce. Anyway, we'll go with dearth. I am currently in the South for a work trip. I'm in Mobile, Alabama. And you have some food reviews from ballpark trips through the South, which I feel like have to have some of the best ballpark food on the planet. Give us some of the highlights.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say it's not the dearth of the off season. Dearth means like a lack. So sometimes in this time of year, there might be a dearth of things to write about or cover.
It's really the dearth of the season, because there is no season as of right now. This is the most plentiful time of off season. We have all kinds of off season.
Yes, which means there is a dearth of relevant information going on at certain points, which allows me to do things such as continue my newsletter and MILB.com series, rounding up all the food that I experienced or had my designated eaters experience at ballparks this year. Already had a roundup of my first trip of the season in the Pacific Northwest. This one covers Birmingham, Montgomery, Pensacola and Biloxi, and some of this stuff I didn't, put up on the newsletter or in articles before. Some of it I just hadn't gotten around to, so it's great to have it all in one place. Birmingham, the Magic City Dog, which is a sausage from local Dreamland Barbecue, smothered in coleslaw and spicy sauces, and so that's a really good one. But I didn't have a designated eater in Birmingham, and I really should have just recruited one on site, and I didn't. So I didn't go too deep in their food. I did go to 2 local barbecue places in Birmingham, though, Jim and Nick's, which I really enjoyed, and then also Saws, SAWS, which has multiple locations in the area. And they had this famous like pork and greens dish, which is a bed of like cheese grits with greens and then pulled pork on top of that, and then topped with like fried onion straws. So Birmingham, no shortage of barbecue. They have Dreamland barbecue products at Regents Field, home of the Birmingham Barons. Montgomery biscuits. Of course, we had a biscuit dish with the Nashville hot chicken biscuit. You can just get plain biscuits if you want. Being in Montgomery, visiting a team called the Biscuits. There's a kiosk that is called Biscuits, of course. But they've got a range of creative stuff. They have the Frito pie dog, which is Frito pie ingredients on top of a hot dog. Frito pie is more like a casserole. It's really good. But they put that kind of stuff on, the beans, cheese, meat on the dog itself. They have good Philly cheesesteak nachos in Montgomery. I grew up near Philadelphia, and I know a lot of people get a little protective of people just calling anything a Philly cheesesteak. I don't really worry about it too much, and I think it's cool that ballparks across the country have variations of Philly cheesesteaks, and chopped meat and cheese and onions and peppers is just always a really good combination. I like it on nachos because that could be gluten-free. So Montgomery Biscuits, of course, a good food destination. Pensacola Blue Wahoo is one of the best in all of minor league baseball, and in terms of the depths of their menu, or not the depths of the menu, the expansiveness of their menu, focused on things there like the Cracker Jack chicken and waffles with like a maple honey dipping sauce, and it's all sprinkled with Cracker Jack dust. The Cuban sandwich reimagined in taco form, another winner. The smashed bullpen burger with 2 smashed patties, bacon, cheese, that kind of thing. Pineapple Dole Whip for dessert. And I feel like even with that, I'm forgetting something. Oh, yes, a shrimp po' boy. So hit up Pensacola if you can. Great food scene at Blue Wahoo's ballpark. And Biloxi Shuckers, where you can get jambalaya in a helmet. I think the only ballpark where you can get jambalaya in a helmet. It's a local cuisine in Mississippi, in the Gulf Coast Mississippi region for sure. Also, they have a partnership with a local barbecue company, and I'm blanking on the name, but really good barbecue nachos there as well as homestand specials featuring things like Conecuh sausage. I believe that's how you pronounce it, Conecuh, Conecuh, a beloved Southern sausage company as well. Anyway, it's all rounded up in the latest newsletter. I've still got a couple more food roundups to do. I always say this, but believe it or not, I still have a couple just road trip standalone articles profiling different people I met on the road still coming out, in addition to, of course, all the rebranding information that you've come to expect and crave.
All right, Ben. Well, one of those is already out there right now in the Rome Emperors, who will take the field under their new identity in 2024. And we got a chance to catch up with Dan Simon on this week's episode of the Show Before the Show, coming up next.
Here on the Show Before the Show podcast, we are delighted to be joined by Dan Simon of Studio Simon, a logo designer who has worked with, well, he probably knows the number, but dozens of minor league teams over a decades-long career. You may not think you know his work, but you almost certainly do. It's all over the minor league baseball landscape, including some new marks that have just been released last week and this week. So without further ado, Dan Simon, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm pretty excited to be speaking with you guys.
Yeah, so where to begin? As I said, you've done so much work over so long, but we do have some new additions to the minor league landscape that you have worked on, including the Rome, well, formerly the Braves, the Rome Emperors, and that logo was announced on Thursday night, just yesterday. So what was the process working with that? This is a team moving away from the parent club that had used to be owned by the parent club, establishing their own identity. What was the process for you like working on the Rome Emperors?
It was, well, you mentioned there are 2 recent things that I've done. And they're 2 very, very different projects. The first one was the Greensboro Grasshoppers, and that was what we would call a brand update, but in that case, we didn't even use the word update because it was kind of less of an update and more, as we referred to it, as a refresh, because you had an identity that was ensconced in the Greensboro community, and it was done a long time ago. It needed kind of some love. But we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, actually, far from it. And so we just gave it that love that I mentioned, and refreshed it, but still stayed true to the roots. In the case of the Rome identity, obviously everything went out the window, and we were creating. We had a team that was named after its parent club for 20 years, and now we were going to give it its own unique identity, but something that was specific to the city of Rome. It's kind of interesting. Rome, Georgia, has many things there that actually reference the Rome, Italy. First of all, Rome, Italy is known for its 7 hills. When I say it's known for it, I don't know how many people know about that, but that is a thing, 7 hills. And there are these 7 hills in Rome, Georgia. I think that's where the name originally came from. I'm not certain of that. There's also an art piece, a large, I don't know if it's called a sculpture, but that's made of it's an aqueduct. So they've got an aqueduct there, and then somewhere in the city they've got a labyrinth, and then there's a statue there that, if I remember correctly, was actually given to the city of Rome by Mussolini. So, and it's still there. Wow. So obviously it's not just called Rome, and then there's no real ties to Rome. There are many ties to Rome there. So, that led to a very Rome-centric brand identity here with the emperors. Rome famous for its emperors, and so we developed a whole brand identity around that, but in a very minor league way by having it feature a.
There's only one road into Key West, but you won't believe where it can take you. Travel back in time to a city rich with history. Discover amazing artists and musicians. Taste seafood fresh off the boat, or just kick back and soak up the island vibe. For more about Key West, visit flakeys.com. Key West, close to perfect, far from normal.
An emperor penguin as the hero of this brand identity system. So it was just so much fun to work on.
Yeah, I spoke recently with Rome Emperor's general manager David Lane, and he's saying why they wanted to do the emperor name and how that ties into Rome, Georgia's connection to Rome, Italy, but they didn't want a Little Caesars looking dude as the primary logo for their team, and then that of course brings in the emperor penguin, and then the finished product is essentially a Roman emperor penguin. And a lot of good signifiers in the logo, with the Roman use of the Roman numerals MMIII to signify the Rome Braves when they were founded in 2003. Roman columns incorporated into the word mark, but then there's like a logo trim that says like GA in a repeatable pattern. And that's one that I didn't even see until David mentioned it to me when I was talking to him. Did you come up with that? Or when you're designing a logo, how those little more subtle Easter egg like type things come in?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, Ben. It's an Easter. Those are Easter eggs. It's the kind of thing. I was actually showing this to my wife this morning. She had seen this before because sometimes I'll share things with her just to get opinions from a lay person. Even though she's married to a sports branding professional, she's not artistically inclined. So she's actually a really good audience or small focus group for me to ask, because she sees things like a civilian sees things. And when I showed it to her, I pointed that out, the thing you're referencing specifically, she said, "Oh, I didn't even notice that." And I said, "You're really not. Most people won't notice it, and it's not. It's meant to be subtle. And then it's kind of the thing when you're then told about it. It's like, oh, look at that, And I guess that's the beauty of Easter eggs. And here's what's funny about where that came from. My office is located just under a mile from my house, and I walk to work every morning, and I walk home for lunch, and then back to work, and then back home. And on my walk, I go through this some of the grounds of some apartments, and there was a plant pot on by this walkway, and it had this Roman pattern around, or what appeared to be like a Roman pattern around, the rim of this planter. And I was looking at it, and my first thought was, I want to incorporate a pattern like that into this brand identity. And when I was working on it, it just made this kind of concentric shape, and that's a familiar thing in Roman designs. And when I looked at it, I was thinking, all of a sudden it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. Wait, I can make that into a G and an A and have it still look like this Roman pattern. And we, or not pattern, I guess it's more of a border element. And we incorporated that into the primary logo. And then there's a secondary logo that's a roundel. Now, by the way, even though I'm in the business, I'm not even sure if it's roundel or roundel.
I wonder that too.
I'm sorry, how have you guys pronounced it?
I feel like I would go roundel, like you said. I think that's how I've said it.
I think that's how I say it too. But you know what? It's not a word I say out loud so much as write and read. That's a roundel. Yeah, I think that's dealer's choice.
It's like the word cache or cachet. I don't know, the CACHE. I don't know how to say that.
There was a comedian who did this little bit about how do you pronounce foyer? He said, is it foyer or foyer? And then the other guy says, I don't know. I'll ask my lawyer. So so roundel. Maybe I'll ask my wife, who's a lawyer. Well, anyway, we incorporated it into the roundel, and then also it's the sleeve stripe detail. So as opposed to a stripe, you've got this border pattern going around the sleeves of all three jerseys. So kind of a cool little thing, and it's for Georgia.
Yeah, well, we've got obviously Tyler Maughan here with us. I'm sure he has a lot of your work on his hat wall back at home in Colorado, and I'm sure he has some questions for you about maybe Rome or maybe just logos in general. But I feel it's time to hear from Tyler. He's chomping.
Go ahead, hit me, Tyler.
Dan, I am very excited to finally get a chance to talk to you because I've loved all your work for so long. And one of the things that we find really interesting with minor league rebrands, especially these days, is we hear so often about the struggle to nail down unique names that are not trademarked. And for something like the Rome Emperors, it seems like, that's something that somebody at some point would have snatched up. But it's so cool to me that was out there for the franchise to have, because for so long I felt like, man, a city named Rome and a team named after the parent club, like what a waste. What was the process to be able to land on something so classic as Rome Emperors? Is that something that the franchise knew that they really wanted right out of the gate? Were there other contenders really that were taken strongly for this identity, or how did that whole process come together?
Well, there were definitely other contenders. It's interesting. I don't know if it's interesting, but we'll talk about it anyway. As Ben mentioned in his introduction to this this conversation. I do have a decades-long career in sports branding, and when I first got into it, it was very rare for a team to come to me and ask for my help or my business's help with coming up with a name. Most of the time, they would come to me with the name, and then I would create their identity. And with increased frequency, teams, I wish I could remember when it really started to happen, but it's definitely been in the past 5, maybe even 10 years. It's happened with much increased frequency. And I love the process. It's so much fun. What I have to do is I've got to do a lot of research. Thank goodness for this thing I've got on my computer called the internet, where you can find anything. And I love all the things that I mentioned about Rome, Georgia. When we first started talking about this, I didn't know any of that stuff until I did the deep dive, and you find out so much stuff, like that they've got a statue there given to them by Mussolini. Like, who? It's stuff like that. I just
really
love.
Is wild.
I'm sorry.
I just said that really is wild. I actually, while we were talking, I was looking it up, and apparently that was like a thing for Mussolini, that he would ship those Roman statues, the Romulus and Remus feeding at the wolf. He just shipped those like all over the world to tons of countries and towns or whatever. Apparently there are some others in the United States, but that I would have had no idea.
Yeah. And it's just such a cool thing. And the fact that they've got an actual aqueduct there and all that stuff. So I just love doing these as I referred to it, a deep dive into this and learn everything I possibly can about a particular city. And then put on my creative hat and try to think of, okay, what can we do with all of this information? So there were several. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember the presentation of name ideas. There were several that came from the idea of Rome, Italy. But then there were other things that were specific just to the area. Like, for instance, they've got a college there, Berry College. That, matter of fact, I just saw an article that said it was headlined the 25 most beautiful college campuses in the United States, and very high on the list. Actually, it was in the top 10. It might have even been in the top 5. Was Berry College, because it's got in addition to beautiful buildings, it's got beautiful grounds, and there are like acres and acres of land that's just beautiful there at Berry College, and there's a lot of deer there. And there are deer all throughout not just on the grounds of Berry College, but around their area. And so there was one of the names was deer specific. So that's something specific to Rome, Georgia, but not to Italy. So there were a whole host of names that were considered. That was then whittled down to, I don't even remember how many I proposed. There was also, they also solicited ideas from the community, a name the team solicitation. And interestingly, even though I came up with the idea of emperors independently, and the idea to do the emperor as an emperor penguin, there was at least one submission by the somebody from, I don't know if it was the community or if this name the team thing was opened up to a nationwide thing. With the internet now, everyone can chime in and make suggestions. But there was somebody who not only suggested the name emperors, but suggested that it be an emperor penguin. So independent of me coming up with the idea, somebody did come up with it. So it genuinely was you know, the ideas that came from the name of the team, submissions were very helpful as well, and ended up being the exact same thing we were thinking of doing. So that's how that process went.
It's so cool. Dan, the era that we're in right now with minor league logos and the whole concept of these wacky team names and things that are wild and outlandish and out there. This one already feels so classic. And you touch on the penguin, and I think it's perfect in the brand guide. There's a line describing the penguin that says, across all professional and college sports, there are only a handful of penguin mascots. Are there penguins in Rome, Georgia? No, but there are no Bengals in Cincinnati or Grizzlies in Memphis. And that's like your first thought when you think, oh, well, they went with a penguin logo. How many penguins are there? Well, that's true. There aren't a whole lot of Bengals in Cincinnati. The idea of getting to play around with the penguin, how cool was that for you? Especially something that, that you came up with and other people had also suggested, but it's not just a stoic, all right, let's keep it to columns and, various iconography that's just specific to the concept of Rome. Like being able to play with a penguin character had to be pretty fun.
Definitely was. Think about certain animals. I will put in there koala bears, panda bears, penguins. Those are three just off the top of my head. But there are some animals that I don't think you can find anyone that doesn't like that particular animal. Like
that's a good point.
Yeah, I once I was with my son Casey. I even remember where this was. We were having lunch. This is like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We were having a sandwich at Subway. Not a sponsor of the podcast, so free advertising for Subway. And we saw a woman who had a tattoo on her leg of an elephant. And I said to Casey, I said, she must really love elephants. But think about that. I think in general, people probably like elephants, but it's not everybody's favorite animal. But even though a penguin is not necessarily everyone's favorite animal, everyone doesn't necessarily love elephants, but everybody loves penguins. So it was, and by the way, speaking of my son, Casey, when he was a kid, that was his favorite animal, if not his favorite thing, penguins. I remember even making a birthday card for him that had a penguin on it because he loved penguins so much. So it's, and we have a stuffed penguin at home. So yeah, I loved working with a penguin, and I loved bringing it to the minor league baseball branding landscape.
Well, and one of the things that I love that's kind of another Easter egg is I don't even know what the term in the toga community would have been for this, but like the pin that holds up the wrap around the penguin, that's a baseball. The wrap itself is the red color that's now the primary color for this Rome franchise. But something that I really love about this, and we talked about this with some other logos in recent years, but I feel like, and I'm very thankful for this, especially in minor league baseball, we seem to have moved away from the like angry animal character logo. For so long, everybody had to have just like a furious face on whatever mascot or logo it was that they unveiled. And this penguin, he's got like a little smirk, a little smile to him. He seems like he's having fun, which is something that's good for minor league baseball. Do you like the way that that's evolved? I feel like we have gone much more in the direction of like, oh yeah, minor league baseball is supposed to be fun. Let's have fun with these logos. That to me feels like a great step. And it really embraces kind of the character of minor league baseball. How do you feel about the way the expressions on all of these logos have changed?
Well, first, I will agree with you, Tyler, that is something you will see in most of the minor league brand identities I develop. However, if you look at, and I want to issue this caveat before I even say what I'm about to say, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm not speaking ill of my competitor at all, but you'll notice with Brandios's identity, their characters might be, because they're, characters, you might use the word kind of cute to describe at least some of them. Their characters often tend to have like gritted teeth. So there is a certain anger look to their characters. And you know what? They're, like I said, I don't mean, I'm not speaking ill of it. As a matter of fact, their identities are very, very popular. So the fans like it. So that works for them.
Well, and even at the college level and at the major league level, in the big four sports, character logos seem to be, I'm, down here broadcasting a college basketball tournament in Mobile, Alabama. The team that I work for is playing Southern Illinois, Edwardsville today. They unveiled a new character logo as of, I believe, last spring. And, it's an angry cougar. And so it's one thing that I feel like minor league baseball has gone in a unique direction with, and there is some of that, but there's also some of like, oh, let's have fun with this too, which seems so different from what, college and professional teams at the major league level do.
Well, it is indeed different. And your point is spot on. And the reason for that difference is the products are different. You touched upon this. Minor league baseball is it's, for some operators, they will even go so far to say, the baseball part is secondary to the fun family entertainment component of minor league baseball. And even though you will see children at major league games and collegiate athletic events, the product of both of those, both major league sports and collegiate sports, is not about family fun. It's about athletics at a very high level. And even though the baseball being played, you've got various levels, obviously, from single. You don't have rookie ball anymore, from single A up to triple A. And it's still a high level of baseball. And the product, it's not just that the product is, the experience is that. You go to a game and, it's famously said, you can, at the end of the game, you might not even be able to tell somebody asks you how your night was at the ballpark. Right. You might not even be able to tell them who won, but you'll be able to tell them you had a really good time. And so a brand identity, whether it's for a minor league baseball team, whether it's for a pizza place, whether it's for a department store, it should reflect what the product is. And if your product's family fun, your logo should reflect that. And when I am doing these, the facial expressions on these characters, I don't want it to be overly fun and happy. It's not like Goofy, Disney's Goofy, but you want it to have, it's still representing a professional sports team, so you want it to have some attitude, but you also want it to be approachable, and I try to find that gray area between athletic and fun, but something still in the middle that like I said is approachable, but still has some attitude, because it's also representing a professional athletes.
All right, Dan, this is my final question for you. I've loved your work for so long, and it's so exciting to get a chance to talk to you. I'm going away from your work for this question. The Rome Emperors, your newest identity. Who is your favorite Roman emperor, Dan?
Well, that would require me being able to name more than one. So,
all right, that's fair.
I have to admit, and when I was working on this identity, I talked about all the research I did. I did research other Roman emperors, but I think if you ask 100 people in the United States, 99 of them are going to say Julius Caesar first. And I fall on one of those 99.
Okay.
And when we were working on this, I don't know if the team has officially given this character a name, but I have referred to him as Julius.
Julius the Penguin. I like that.
Yes. So whether that ends up being his name or not, I don't know. That's up to the team whether they want to have a Name the Penguin contest or whether they're just going to go with that. That's for them to decide. I give them the tools that they need to achieve their goals and realize their vision, and then it's up to them how they want to run with it.
I like that.
Yeah, well, for the record, I'm a Caligula guy.
Wow. I'm going Marcus Aurelius in this conversation. So we got 3 different votes. Caligula would be a very interesting name for the logo / mascot.
Yeah, I don't think a family-friendly organization is going Caligula.
Nero, maybe. Nero could be a thing, carry around.
Yeah, Nero, that's a good one. The thing is, it's you always have to be careful with these things because you end up naming something after somebody, and then you find out that somebody has.
That person was actually horrible, right? Right. Which I think, by modern standards, we could look at every Roman emperor and think, "Oh, you're not my kind of guy, exactly."
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Dan, as Tyler recently put it in a Slack message, he says, we could talk to you for hours. We will not do that. So I'm sure you have things to do. But before we let you go, I'm just kind of curious where you are right now in your own work schedule. Your work in November and December gets a lot of attention in the world of minor league baseball because that's when it's unveiled. But obviously, these are projects you had been working on, well prior to the unveiling. So as the calendar year concludes, kind of where are you at in your process in terms of working with clients and projects and things like that?
Well, that opens up a whole can of worms, Ben. Right now, I am indeed very, very busy, and the reason for that is this is a peek behind the curtain that most fans not only do they not know, but they wouldn't even think about because they're not in this business and they don't need to think about it. But because minor league baseball and major league baseball has a single licensee who does their caps, New Era Cap Company, and because of all the caps that are done, think about this: you've got 120 minor league teams, 30 major league teams. In the minor leagues, especially, you then have all these alternate identities. Well, before the alternate identities, just take your minor league team's principal identity. Teams will have anywhere from 2 to 7 caps, okay, just with their regular identity. Then you've got alternate identities like the Fresno tacos and the Charleston boiled peanuts, et cetera, et cetera. Many teams have multiple alternate identities. Then you've got the Copa de la Diversión identities. You've got the Marvel identities. So there are so many. Take 120 minor league teams and multiply that by all of the different caps they have. There's hundreds and hundreds of caps. Then you also have, like I said, the major league caps and other people that or leagues that New Era works with, and you factor in the fact that all of those caps are produced overseas. They have to be done so far in advance. December 4th, right now we're at November 16th. December 4th is the deadline for final cap artwork for all of the official on-field caps, not the alternate identities, not the Copa identities, but all of the principal identities caps is the deadline for 2025.
Wow.
December 4th, 2023 is the deadline for cap artwork for 2025 minor league baseball principal brand identities. So right now we're down to crunch time because it is 3 weeks from them with a holiday in between. And so everything else has been done. The other teams have been done, but I kind of had a bomb dropped on me, frankly, just a few weeks ago, where I have to do a whole team identity and get that cap artwork finalized by December 4th. So I'm pretty busy right now because of that deadline. 15 months before these caps will see the field of play, the artwork is due for them.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. There's so many moving parts and behind the scenes stuff that goes on with bringing these logos and team names to life. Well, Dan, we'll let you get back to the crunch and back meeting on this, but really appreciate you joining the Show Before the Show podcast. And of course, as always, looking forward to seeing what else you got coming up in the coming weeks, days, months, years, and whatever else is going on. So thanks so much.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on. This was fun talking with you guys. Ben, Tyler, thank you so much for having me on.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you another thrilling edition of Ghosts of the Miners. Now, here's your correspondent and host, Joshua Jackson.
Welcome back to Ghosts of the Miners, in which all of you out there in Radioland must identify the legitimate historical ball club or player hiding amidst the fraudulent pair. One played every single inning. The others never appeared in a single outing. In the last segment, I asked you which of the following minor league baseball teams did at one time exist. A. The Thunder Bay Thugs. B. The Paris Bruisers. C. The Beaumont Roughnecks. You've shown tough stuff if you've picked C. The Beaumont Roughnecks, who clouted about in the Texas League for 2 seasons in the 1950s. Beaumont, just a tick up the Neches River from the Gulf of Mexico harbor city of Port Arthur, fielded a team called the Beaumont Exporters for several decades at the beginning of the 20th century, and in 1946 took on a working agreement with the Yankees, which the Roughnecks kept. For more on the Exporters, import episode 372 of the Show Before the Show onto your Radioland receiving device. But let's not get caught looking back. No rubbernecking. Today we're shipping out the Exporters and talking Roughnecks, who took their name from oil industry slang. The oil industry being Beaumont's big business both historically and at the time. The franchise's drilling for a new name coincided with a managerial change born out of unfortunate necessity. Martin Chick Autry had helmed Beaumont for the past 2 seasons when he suffered a fatal heart attack in late January of 1950 at his winter home of Colonel's Island, Georgia. The man brought in to replace him was already baseball royalty. To be specific, the Raja. In 1950, the 54-year-old Rogers Hornsby had already been in the Hall of Fame as a player for 8 years and had big league managing experience with the Cardinals, Giants, Braves, Reds, and Browns. But when Beaumont hired Hornsby, he hadn't held a managing or coaching job since helming the Veracruz Blues down in Mexico in '44. At the reins for Beaumont, Hornsby started a journey that would bring him back to the big show in 2 years' time. And the record suggests that Hornsby's return to the dugout was a smooth transition. Yes, the Roughnecks uniform fit Hornsby to a Texas T, and the team named for oil workers played pretty slick ball, with plenty of gas from the pitchers, combustible hitting, and runners who burned up the bases. That 50 Beaumont club had Gil McDougald, soon to be the 1951 American League Rookie of the Year with the Yankees, as well as 10 other players who had appeared or would eventually appear in a big league game. Those Roughnecks routed not a few of their opponents, beating up the whole circuit to go 91-62, with McDougald leading the loop with 187 hits. But it was a bad break for the Roughnecks in the playoffs, as the San Antonio Missions beat them in the first round 4-9. As if that wasn't bleak enough for Beaumont, Hornsby skedaddled to Seattle to manage the 51 Rainiers in the Pacific Coast League, and the Roughnecks resorted to placing at the helm one Harry Kraft. Kraft was a crafty baseball man, to be sure. He later managed the Kansas City A's and the Chicago Cubs and the Houston Colt 45s, but could he match the noble presence of the great Raja? History says no. The Roughnecks finished 4th under his management in 51 and 7th out of 8 in 52. But the roughest news for the Roughnecks came in 53 when Beaumont brought back the Exporters moniker. And that's how the Roughnecks were sanded down.
Some places take you away, some bring you together. Marathon does both. Marathon is Florida's family key, with something for everyone. You'll find museums and wildlife refuges, wide open beaches, miles of warm, clear water, and the historic 7-mile bridge. For more about Marathon, visit flakeys.com/marathon.
Now, on to the question for next time. Which of these players had a sickly steep name in the minors of yesteryear? A. Puke Pile. B. Ralph Mountain. C. Spew Heathcliff. Want to know the answer? Sip some ginger ale. Or tune into the next Ghost of the Miners. But for now, you'll have to excuse me. My producer Ben Hill is looking for a decorative gourd, and I've got to hide my head.
Final segment of this week's episode of the show before the show. Just the biggest thanks from us to Dan Simon of Studio Simon for joining us on this week's episode. We also, when we hung up, we sat and talked music for like 30 minutes with Dan. He took down a couple of bands that I named, and I feel like I don't want to let Dan Simon down. If he listens to the bands that I recommended and he doesn't like them, I'm going to be devastated.
Yeah, that's why I keep everything to myself.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to not like something I like, so it's better to just hoard it, keep it to myself,
That's a smart plan.
than to champion anything that then people check out and they're like, "What? What is this?" Not really.
You've got terrible taste.
Yeah, I mean, I used to a lot more, especially when I had in the old Ben's Biz blog days. I'd go out of my way to make references to bands I like, have little Easter egg links to different song titles if I was able to work it into a post, really go deep on all the record stores I visited. And I still do a little of that now on social media and whatnot. But after a while, I was just kind of like, you're just trying to tell people that you're really into cool, diverse, underground music. But how many people are really engaging you with it? So I don't make it as much of a thing anymore, just because I didn't feel like I was getting as much engagement, and I was starting to feel a little too precious with all of it. But man, I do love music. I got a lot of records at home, and in this era of my life, it's hard to listen to all the records I buy. And I have an elaborate rotation system in which I try to process everything I buy and listen to it a certain amount of times, and it's just way backed up. Too much music, too little time.
Yeah, it's yeah, I hear you. All right, Ben. We are nearly set to wrap this week's episode of the show before the show. Presumably, at some point, Sam Dykstra will emerge from the wilderness from his travails through the western expanses of this continent. I would assume he's going to have a big, giant, burly beard, and he's going to be, enlightened as to the meaning of life, given how long he's been away exploring. And I'm excited for that moment, but we don't yet have it. I guess we have to wait until next week.
Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, Sam's already so enlightened, probably the most enlightened person I've ever met. Always has the correct opinions. His moral standing is unimpeachable. So who knows how even more refined he will be by the time he gets back to us. His
You're not wrong.
glow will emanate even in a non-visual medium, and you'll just be so glad he's back.
Can't wait. What else we got to cover before we get out of here?
I don't think really. It's a slow time of year. There is a dearth of content.
It's dearth-filled.
Dearth-filled, a contradiction in terms. On a special dearth-filled episode of Show Before the Show. But hey, we've talked about Rome Braves quite a bit on this episode, obviously. The Rome Braves, that franchise has operated consecutively since 1968, and it's always been an Atlanta affiliate named the Braves until this recent name change to the Emperors. But you know that Rome, that franchise played in 4 locations prior to arriving in Rome, Georgia, going back to 1968. I would only have been able to name one of them.
Wow.
Tyler, do you have any idea of the 4 places that the Rome Braves played, or now Rome Emperors franchise played before landing in Rome?
I should know. Actually, I think I do know one. Columbus, Georgia.
That is a good guess, but incorrect.
Dang it.
There was a team in Columbus, Georgia, the Catfish, up into the 21st century, but then they moved to, I cannot recall. We'll have to look that up, but it's not Columbus, Georgia.
Man, I'm not sure I know any of these, which I feel my first minor league job was with the team that was the level above Rome. So like all of our guys who got promoted or sent down would go to or from Rome. So I feel like I should have, and that was in 2009 when I started working in the minors, which was only 6 years after the establishment of the Rome Braves, which means I certainly should have come across at least some reference to wherever Rome was previously. Was it in Georgia?
Not always. It had been some iterations. This team, and I do not recall this team started in 1968 in the Western Carolinas League, kind of a precursor to today's Sally League. They started out as the Greenwood Braves from 1968 to 79 in Greenwood, South Carolina. Which I would not have known.
I don't even know of Greenwood, South Carolina.
Yeah. Then they had a short run in Anderson, the Anderson, South Carolina Braves.
Okay.
Just for several years. But after the 1984 season, so they played about 5 years in Anderson. After the 84 season, they moved to Sumter, South Carolina to establish the Sumter Braves. And they lasted there through 1990, and then they made it to Georgia. And this is the only one I would have been able to tell you going into this, and ended up the Macon Braves.
Oh, yeah, the Macon Braves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only one I would have known, but you can trace it back to consecutive operation in Greenwood, South Carolina, Anderson, South Carolina, Sumter, South Carolina, Macon, Georgia, and then Rome, Georgia. And from 1968 all the way through 2023 season, that team was always the Braves. So it gives you a little bit of a indication that this is a big move for this franchise to go away from the Braves name and become the Rome Emperors.
Macon, a town famous for a former minor league hockey team there named the Macon Whoopee, which was
classic. A little too risque for my taste. But
yeah, that's a lot. I also did not know this until looking it up just now, but their logo was a whooping crane, which was being harassed by a bee. And the play on that there was the birds and the bees. That's wow.
Whoa. I don't
a lot happening there.
Might have to contact a Congress person or two about that. See if they can maybe call it.
This vulgarity will not last. They apparently were only around for 5 years, 1996 to 2001. The Macon Whoopee.
Okay, and then it's too far in the past. I'm no longer
exactly. We don't need to be. Now we can just pass judgment on it. And those people in the late 90s, what were they doing?
Yeah, hedonists. If they were.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the show. Before the show, a huge thanks to Dan Simon for stopping by. Next week, obviously a holiday week. We have yet to nail down our plan for next week, but we'll be with you next week, the week after, whenever. It's the dearth of the offseason. There will not be a dearth of Thanksgiving food. I'm very excited for the opposite of dearth, the bounty, in fact. Ben, what are your plans for what are you guys doing for Thanksgiving? Does Henry eat the turkey yet?
Well, that'd be Harry.
Did I say Henry? Does Harry eat the turkey yet?
He'll have like a bite or two, but for the most part, he'll just advocate constantly for what he calls smoothies, but they're just little like flavored yogurt in a cup. He's obsessed with those. So
okay.
If Thanksgiving was up to him, it'd just be a bunch of smoothies, but he'll have a little turkey.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to the Poconos. We did this last year in my family. We lack kind of a central place with enough room to accommodate. So going to the Poconos for a long Thanksgiving weekend and having a meal out there in the Pocono Mountains.
That sounds fun.
Should be good.
That sounds fun. Tell Harry we all wish him happy Thanksgiving and to make a friend named Henry at some point.
I will tell him just that when I get home, and I'm sure he will appreciate that message for sure. And what about you, Tyler? Before we get out of here, I
am headed your way. My aunt, she doesn't listen to this podcast. Nobody tell my aunt that I'm coming out there. Going out there to surprise my aunt, we ordinarily do Thanksgiving in New York, but I've worked in college basketball the last several years. I guess it is 7 years, weirdly. Which ordinarily we're playing on that day or that weekend. This year, that's not the case. My aunt in New York City has dealt with some health issues, so the wife and I are going to go out and be part of that Thanksgiving, and I'm very excited about it. But if you know my aunt, please don't tell her anyone. Don't tell my aunt that we're coming.
I think your secret's safe, but you can never tell.
I'll be actually, if it does get back to my aunt because someone listens to this podcast who knows her, I think that would be kind of a cool way to have the surprise ruined.
That is a surprise in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. So a happy Thanksgiving to all of you. We'll be back to catch you soon. For Ben Hill, Sam Dyksford, Josh Jackson, our huge thanks to Dan Simon. My name is Tyler Mon. Happy Thanksgiving next week, everybody. We'll catch you then.
I'm Snoop Dogg, and I'm giving up smoke. I know what you're thinking. Snoop, smoke is kind of your whole thing. But I'm done with it. I'm done with the coughing and my clothes smelling all funky. I'm going smokeless. Solo stove, fixed fire. They took out the smoke. Now you can have a nice blaze without any clouds ruining your day. Go smokeless. Go to solostove.com. Tell them Big Snoop Dogg sent you. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha.